Sophomore in high school, I didn't have a car. I had a small dirt bike, a Bridgestone 100 that I would sometimes ride to school. Sometimes I would drive the Bronco, slow and loud and muddy, that we used for irrigating and checking cattle. I was driving that the night of the accident. After, there was a dent in the bumper, small, I think from where his head hit. And still sometimes I took the bus, walked to the end of the lane a half mile or so over the ditch, under the freeway, and wait next to the old highway for the bus to come. First week of school, I'm too old for the bus now, so I'm trying to be in the bus, but not of the bus. I hear a commotion a few rows back, and I turn to see some kids giving this other kid shit. Never seen any of them before, 3-on-1. They were grabbing his book, slapping the back of his head. The bus driver was worthless, ignored anything and everything to do with the kids. As long as there was no blood or broken bones, it was all okay by him. The kid was being stoic, just trying to ride it out. I got out of my seat and walked back, slapped one of them on the crew cut of his head, took a book from another and handed it back to the boy, then picked the other one up by the front of his coat and carried him to the back of the bus where they had been sitting before and deposited him in his seat, making sure the others followed. And if I ever see them messing with this boy again, they're going to wish they hadn't, okay? Well, I was a big guy, so they listened. Went back down the aisle, stopped to ask the boy if he was okay. Yeah, I'm okay. You mind if I sit down? Oh, yeah, sure. He moved his books to give me room. So, do you know those kids who were giving you a hard time? He half turned to have a look at them. Nah, they're just little boneheads. That made him laugh. Yeah, they just don't know how to behave, that's all. Oh, it's as simple as that. Well, that's what my dad says. He straightens up a little to imitate his father. You know, kiddo, some kids just don't know how to behave. Huh. They don't have anyone to show them what's right and what's wrong, so they'll do what's wrong without knowing they're doing it. He stops quoting. That's what he says. Well, he sounds pretty smart, your dad. Yeah, he is a lot smarter than me. Well, you got quite a few books here. Looks like you might be pretty smart too. Yeah, I am, for a little kid. Well, good. We became friends. On days I rode the bus, I'd sit with Frankie. I'd ask him if the other kids were leaving him alone, which apparently they were. And after a while, we got into the difficulties of school and math. I did flashcards with him, learning his pluses and minuses. I told him about playing football and riding motorcycles, and he told me about crop rotation. Alfalfa follows corn because corn eats everything in the soil. And learning how to snare a prairie dog by laying a little loop of string around the hole of their mound and lying in wait till one of them pokes his head up far enough to be snared. I'd never had a friend this young, but it made sense, like we were meant to know each other. The week after his funeral, my mother told me to dress up. We're going to see the boy's parents. We are? Yeah, come on, get dressed. Your father's waiting for us. I sat in the back of the car as we drove the 3 or 4 miles. 3 or 4 miles up to their farm, just past the feed lot and off the old highway toward the river. I didn't ask what we were going to say, what we might expect. How do we do this? No one offered conversation. It was silence from the minute we left straight through to our arrival. We parked in the gravel of the farmyard, dogs barking, then quietening as we got out of the car. Mr. Wimsett came to the door. He smiled, welcomed us, brought us inside, said his wife was in the back of the house in the bedroom, and offered Mom and Dad a cup of coffee. Mom asked, could she go back? And sure, of course you can, just down the hall there. He walked with her to the hallway. Honey, Mrs. Cober's coming back, that okay? He listened, then nodded to my mother, said, go on back. He poured coffee for himself and my dad. I was given a glass of water, and we were invited into the living room. I sat on the couch, Dad on an old wingback chair with doilies on the arms. Frankie's dad sat across the coffee table from me in a chair he'd carried in from the kitchen. Atop the mantel behind and above him were framed baby pictures of 2 boys, Frankie and his brother Jesse, and another of Frankie and his dad dressed in nice clothes. They both were smiling, proud of each other. That's your boy? Asked my father, nodding. Mr. Wimsett looked around and nodded himself. Yep, there's our boys. He turned back to us and smiled, sad but genuine. And I watched the two of them, awed by the back and forth of two adult men seeing the grace of this father who had lost so much so recently, and watching my own father navigate the unknown of these moments. It was as if they knew some moral code I wasn't yet privy to that directed their conversation. You could hear the boundaries of it as they discussed the price of cattle and sugar, what the new feedlot meant to the valley, how the market looked for next year. Common ground. There was a wail of grief from the back of the house, a keening of bottomless despair beyond anything I'd ever heard. Beyond the cry I'd heard on the night of the accident, no less fresh, but filled now with the weight of every day, every day, every day, my boy is gone, my boy is gone. My breath caught in my throat and I looked away, trying to crawl inside myself so as not to hear. The men dropped their eyes to their hands, to the floor, waiting for the wave of it to subside. And as it did, it became a soft sobbing, and we could hear my mother's voice comforting her, one mother to another. Mr. Wimsett raised his eyes, took a breath, and began telling us stories about Frankie, how smart he was, how full of life. He wanted to know about everything, followed his father around like the sun rose and set on him when clearly it was the other way around. He taught Frankie about internal combustion engines as they overhauled the tractor, about crops and cattle, about catching prairie dogs with a string lasso. He told me about his new friend on the bus. Came home one day and said there was this older boy who'd protected him from some bullies, and then later how they were becoming friends, about how special it was to have that kind of friend. How excited he was on the days you got on the bus. He'd watch out the window when they got to your stop, and some days you were there and he knew it was going to be a good day. Somewhere in there, I became aware that the new friend was me, and my gaze traveled from down and away slowly up and into his eyes, and the wholly unexpected warmth there. The idea of Frankie talking about me and now his father reporting it to me came at me from the side, skirting the black machinery of guilt in my head and touching me in one small space, making a mark of compassion in the darkness of everything, a gift from this man who somehow didn't hate me. Thank you, he said to me. Thank you for being my boy's friend. It meant the world to him. As if it were just the two of us. As if my father, my mother, his wife, his grief-stricken home, all had faded away, leaving him free to offer me what he could. And by looking into my young eyes, having the chance to say goodbye to his own boy in a way more alive and immediate than what he'd been able to do on his own. I never did lay eyes on Frankie's mother. She stayed back where my mother had joined her, in her own bedroom or clutching the bedspread of her dead son. Mr. Wimsett showed us to the door, thanked us for coming, shaking my mother's hand and thanking her for spending time with his wife, shaking my father's hand and telling him to take care, and shaking my hand and telling me, you take care of yourself, okay? And then again, okay? Until finally, I was able to look him in the eye one final time and nod my head yes. And though I didn't really know what he meant and had no idea how to take care of myself at all and would not know how for many, many years forward, I so appreciated his insistence that I let him be a father in that moment to me, and that I let myself be a son for just that moment to him. Thank you.
Man.